He arrives when the city is already under its evening lamps, a clean glow on old brick, the kind that softens edges and makes footsteps sound careful. The air smells like rain that hasn't fallen yet, a plane, a bus or a train. However he comes in, the rules are the same. Keep the bag small, the pockets organized, and the mind tuned for small systems, clocks, doors, ledgers, ticket stubs. He is not hunting jump scares, he is collecting proofs. This is research for quiet horror, the kind that uses receipts and stair creaks in place of screams. Boston offers both, warm streets and older stories, nothing desperate, nothing loud. He checks a watch set to local time and notes the seconds as they pass, because later, when the paper and the audio don't match, one of those seconds might matter. He picks a base near the old neighborhoods, Beacon Hill if he can swing it, North End if he wants street sound under the window, somewhere he can walk at dawn without meeting a crowd. He unpacks in the same order he always does, notebook in the top drawer, batteries in a shallow bowl, cables coiled and tied in pairs, pocket lav in a cloth pouch, backup cards in a flat tin with a sticker on the lid that says AB. He works by routine because routine is a safety rail. The stories he chases have loose stairs and missing handholds. The night is for a light reconnaissance. He walks 3 slow blocks with no plan but to hear the city breathe. Crosswalk clicks, a kettle drum busker, shop doors that ring a bell on a spring. He photographs thresholds, rubbed brass, paint rubbed thin where a palm lands every day. Thresholds mark entries and exits matter to horror more than anyone admits. A door that opened once when it shouldn't can supply an evening's worth of unease. He keeps to simple language in his notes: brownstone stoop, gas lamp halo, puddle catches lamp, shoe squeak. He does not write metaphors, metaphors do not testify. He peeks into a bakery where the last tray is cooling. He writes 8:42, still warm, and the number settles him. He finds a small square, brick, a narrow tree, a bench, and he sits. The plan is honest: 3 days, 3 anchors. Day 1 warms the senses and sets the logistics. Day 2 goes to Salem and stays there long enough to hear both the carnival and the record speaking. Day 3 drops south to Fall River to walk a house where the ordinary floor plan refuses to calm down. He sketches a map with a pen, Boston as a circle, a line northeast to Salem, a line south to Fall River, a return. The map is not for directions, it is for scale. People forget how close quiet terror and quiet comfort can live on a small map. He flips the page and draws a small table, what to capture, what to avoid. Hands, hinges, clocks, no faces, no grief, no ruined tourism. He writes the project's vow in the margin: care before fear. It is a pocket rule. If a place feels thin, he steps back. The rest of the first night is for room tone. He cracks the window and records, counting in his head for a full minute, so he remembers how long he stayed with the air, as it really is. A siren passes far enough away to be a soft ribbon, and the city returns to a hush. He's tempted to script already, to shape a sentence that will carry a viewer from lamp to stair, but he waits. The field decides the story, not the other way around. He tapes a small checklist to the back of his phone: keys, cards, battery, ID, cash, respect. He underlines respect. Then he dims the lamp to the lowest click and lets the room return to itself. In the morning he will walk for light, and the camera will be polite. For now he listens to the building settle. Somewhere a neighbor sets down a cup. Somewhere an elevator opens, pauses, closes. Small systems doing their work, exactly the kind of comfort that makes later contradictions sting. He wakes before the alarms and watches the room change from charcoal to paper grey. The first task is simple: Collect proofs of an ordinary city at an ordinary hour. Horror that wants to feel true must sit on a base of the everyday. He ties his laces, slides the notebook into a pocket, and moves with no rush. Outside, brick is still damp from night air. It holds a colder smell in low places. He starts with corners, where two walls meet and the light can't reach. He photographs a corner where a broom rests, bristles soft with use. A corner like that has cleaned up after hundreds of evenings, and all of those evenings are witnesses. He records room tone in a stairwell, because stairwells in older buildings have their own language, a soft delay of footsteps, a single creak that returns on every fifth tread, a door closer that breathes back at your hand. He checks the camera level against an old window frame and lets the lens take in the paint ridges where someone brushed a long time ago and a long time after that, building a soft hill of color. He shoots the clock on a public wall at 7:06 because he likes the 6. He writes 7:06 Boston Public Clock. Good. The next move is travel rehearsal. Even if the plan says train to Salem, he will walk to the station and time the steps. He counts in blocks, 1 block, 2, 3. 1 turn, 1 crosswalk. A smell of coffee strong enough to stick. He isn't checking timetables, he is checking his nerves against the morning. Crowds shape a day without your consent. He finds the platform and looks at the line paint. Yellow, chipped, periodic cat paw if you look long enough. He photographs the warning text because later he may want a cutaway between two heavier thoughts, and the mind of a viewer rests kindly on big letters and simple rules. He listens for the station's own heartbeat, announcements that echo 1 syllable longer than they should, the breath of a train at the far end that rides the rail into the bones. He lets one train go. It is not his. He returns to the streets and collects Boston B-roll that will later explain the kind of day Salem sits inside. Lampposts, the edge of a park gate, a delivery truck's lift gate rattling down. Every ordinary sound is a soft promise, and promises make later broken things hurt. He keeps the lens at waist height for a while and watches only shoes, rubber soles, leather heels, a child's light-up sneaker that misses its flash in daylight. Shoes tell the truth without asking permission. On a quiet corner, he opens the notebook and draws another simple table, clocks, doors, ledgers, rails. He adds ferry rope, though he may never see it. The word helps him hear the water that divides maps. He notes down small phrases he can trust later. Paper sign that says closed, coin tray, ticket tear. Hinge squeal not bothered to be fixed. He eats standing up under a shop awning, plain bread. He doesn't need the day to tip from careful to indulgent. He watches the city make breakfast for itself and doesn't film the people. People deserve mornings. He keeps the lens for the hands, gloves pulling a gate, a barista's press, a janitor's quiet loop of keys. Before 10, he's packed and on the way to the track. He holds the phone with the checklist on the back and taps each word without looking. Keys, tap, cards, tap, battery, tap, ID, tap, cash, tap, respect, tap. When the train opens, the door S-edge, silver, shows a line of dings half a thumbnail wide, and he photographs just the dings, because those dings are the true ledger of use. He sits by a window and watches the city change out to lower buildings and then to trees, and he thinks about how close history can sit to snacks and schedules. He writes a single question at the bottom of the page. How do you tell a Salem story without borrowing a voice that isn't yours? He draws a box around the question and closes the book. The train's interior chime is gentle. The car is soft with commuters who have agreed to a temporary shared silence. He lets the view run, but not all of it. He keeps something back for the arrival because arrivals are also systems, and he will need his full attention when the platform asks him to move. He steps down into Salem with the same care he would use stepping onto a dock. The ground is solid, but the story under it moves. The station sits like a good new hinge attached to an old door. The city swings from it, and October swings farther than any month. He keeps his gear tight because Salem has 2 layers on days like this. In the first layer, the town is exactly what it is: homes, schools, a library, a museum with a clean lobby, and a gift shop with pennies and books for children. In the second layer, the town is a costume the town wears, and the costume attracts more costumes, and soon you cannot tell which voice is the one you need for the night. He decides not to pick a voice. He will collect both layers and let the paper decide how they sit next to each other. He walks to the memorial first because names should go first. The stone benches have their own temperature. In shade, they stay cooler. He places a hand on one corner and doesn't write what he feels. He writes the measurements he can carry later. Length of the bench by a careful stride, count. Width by handspan, depth by 2 fingers. There is a notch where rain has learned to rest. He reads the names without speaking and notes the letter at the start and the one at the end, because alphabets matter to people who write, and a story that runs from one letter to another letter is a small spell any mind can learn. He does not film grief. He steps back and looks at light. Leaves throw a soft pattern on stone. A branch moves, a shadow unlaces and laces itself again. He records the pattern for 10 slow breaths because the viewer at home may be tired or alone, and 10 breaths of pattern can keep company without asking anything back. He moves to the old streets where the second layer is brighter. There are signs, decorations, a child laughing under a cape that drags a little. He photographs only hands, a hand on a leash, a hand on a paper cup, a hand adjusting a hat. A vendor lays out things that glint. He buys nothing, but he notes the sound of a clasp and a bell sewn to a cuff. If a later line needs a chime, he knows where to get one without lying. He keeps the camera low and slow, and no one looks at him twice, partly because he is almost still, and partly because Salem in the season is a place where the unusual doesn't tug attention hard. He turns one corner, and the air cools. The witch house sits with its black face and its diamond windows, and the street noise thins. He does not go in yet. He sketches the slope of the roof and the angle of the afternoon, counts the shakes of wood from the window line to the eave. He writes, exterior, plain, and that word plain is not an insult here. Plain is a promise. Plain houses hold difficult stories because they refuse to exaggerate for you. He steps to the fence, then steps away. He does not need to lean. He walks the line of the street and watches the houses that are not on postcards. A porch with a broom, a chair with the seat sagged a little, a window air unit with a level wedge under it. Ordinary maintenance is the opposite of mystery and the right neighbor for it. He turns his attention toward the museum that everyone argues about, the one where the show is a show, not an archive. He doesn't mind shows. A show teaches crowd behavior, sound levels, the bright and the dark. He notes the length of the queue and the rhythm of the door. He counts how long it takes the light to return to a viewer's eyes when they step back out. Those numbers will help him pace a sequence later. He doesn't film faces. He films the door pushing out and the floor catching a shoe. Around him, the season keeps its carnival. He lets a costumed group pass and collects the echo they leave on the brick. He has a rule about crowds: never walk faster to chase a shot. Slow down so the shot can come back to you. When the weight of noise starts pressing on the back of his neck, he turns inland by 3 streets and finds a quieter block where a cat sleeps under a truck. He sets the camera down to knee height and records 3 minutes of blank nothing that isn't a nothing at all. Wind on a flag, a door that clicks twice because the latch is tired, a bike chain that shifts its own weight. Then he writes a single negative space question in the notebook. If the day is this alive, what does the night withdraw? He draws the answer space and leaves it blank so the night can write in it later. He returns to the center as the light changes. The day is never still, even when the mind is, and Salem, between carnival and record, teaches that all by itself. He plans his evening like a careful meal, a show for the public story, a walk for the private one, a final stop at a place with a steady light and a door that doesn't argue. He takes a ticketed presentation not for facts, the record sits elsewhere, but for rhythm. Horror on a stage shows where people lean forward, where they hold a breath, where they laugh, to come back to themselves. He watches the room in the dim and listens with his eyes. He times the parts, opening preface, main tableau, pause, second passage, close. He notes the audio levels when the narrator lifts and when the speakers push. He watches how long it takes a body to relax after a drum hit. He is not judging taste, he is studying physiology. Later, when a quiet paragraph needs to carry a heavy idea, he will know how many seconds to rest before he sets the next sentence down. When the doors open and the crowd flows, he steps into the slipstream as if into a current, and then into an eddy at the edge where the noise thins. He walks 2 blocks without raising the camera and lets his nervous system decide when to work again. On a side street, he finds a lamp with a globe that hums a little. The hum sits at a frequency the body notices but doesn't name. He records the hum and writes side street, and that will become a bed underneath a list later. He moves back toward the memorial because night transforms stone, and anybody who writes about place should see it both ways. He does not point the lens at names, he points it at the boundary, the low wall, the path, the tree line, the place where you step in and the place where you step out. Boundaries are also systems, and a story that respects a boundary can stand longer than one that steals from behind it. He thinks of the children laughing 3 hours earlier and hears now how laughter drains out a city as temperature falls. He passes a shop with costume wigs pinned on heads that look strange in glass at night. He does not film the faces, he films the pins, bright and thin, and the way the glass catches a neon reflection from a store across the street that is not part of this shop at all. Reflections are accidental edits. One store writes on another because a pane of glass offered itself. He files that thought for a later transition. Near a crosswalk, he pauses and records the walk signal's tick. If he layers that tick under a hallway shot tomorrow, the mind of a viewer may believe a hallway has a heartbeat. He is careful with tricks he does not fake. He translates rhythms with a label because labeled translation is not a lie. He eats something hot from a place with 4 stools and thanks the person at the grill with full attention. Attention is also part of the ethic. It keeps him from turning the world into material. After, he walks a block without looking at his phone. The town has decided on its night mood. Voices are lower, but there are more of them, layered in thin sheets. Laughter in one, a story in another, a worry in a third. He lets the layers pass and finds a street with fewer lamps and more sky. There he does the test he does in every town. He stands still for a full count of 60 and listens for the unique sound of that place at that hour. Salem gives him, in order, a distant door slam, a skateboard wheel click, a gull who forgets the hour, a radiator hiss from a window with a shade half down, and a low car that idle hums like a cat. He records 30 seconds, then another 30, because the second half always has a surprise. A woman walks by and says to her friend, "I thought it would be scarier." He writes the sentence down exactly, not to use, but to remember the distance between expectation and form. There is a final stop he keeps for himself. A churchyard edge where the path curves and a lamp throws a soft triangle on stone. He stands at the edge, not in, and watches the triangle shrink and grow with a branch. He says nothing. He shoots nothing. He lets the triangle measure his breath. When the cold reaches through the coat, he steps back to his room and lays out the day S notes on the bed like file cards. He looks for patterns, clocks at 06, door closes, lamp hums, boundary frames. He sees how the carnival and the record could sit as neighbors without talking too loudly over one another. He writes a single sentence for tomorrow to carry, go back in daylight to where the light failed. Then he sets the notebook aside, backs up the cards twice, labels both with the date and the city, and picks the lamp down to its lowest click. In the after-silence, the room returns to being just a room. He lets it be that. He sleeps. He starts early enough to hear gulls before cars. The harbour air moves in thin lines through side streets, and the boards of old houses hold a smell he can't name without lying, salt and paint and time. The house of the 7 Gables waits with its angles tucked in like folded wings. He stops short of the gate and lets the eye measure the roof lines. 7 is a number that invites counting. Counting calms. He traces eaves with a fingertip in the air, so that later, when he says the shape of the place, he can say it from the hand, not a brochure. A docent unlocks something in the distance. He hears the small click carry and writes, click, distant, 7:41. He likes when the day begins with work sounds. It means the story is attached to lives that go on. He keeps the camera low and slow on the walk up, pebbles underfoot, a leaf that spins in a rill, the gate latch worn to bright metal where thumbs land. A group forms near the entry. He takes the last place and reads the sign with the rules. No flash. Stay with the guide, watch your step. He appreciates rules. They make good neighbors for risk. Inside, the air is cooler. The floorboards say hello in a language of soft question marks. He checks his stance, weight centered, knees unlocked, so the creak belongs to the house and not a stomp he brought in. The guide begins with names he has heard, and some he has not. He doesn't write them down, he writes the intervals between the names. Name, pause, date, longer, pause, detail, short pause. Rhythm first, facts later. He can look up a date. He cannot easily recreate how a voice sets a room. Timber frames the view like a patient set of hands. The black of the beams is not flat. It holds a brown and a blue if you stand at a slant. He steps to a side so the beam becomes a border for the room beyond. Fireplace brick, a chair, a simple iron latch. He photographs the latch twice, once for shape and once for shadow. He keeps faces off the sensor and watches for the moments when the room forgets he is a visitor. A drawer that shuts softly, a window that finds its own level when a draft glides under, a corner where a spider web writes a thin, diagonal thesis about patience. They talk about a narrow stair, a private way, a showpiece that has its own magnetism. He does not run a finger along it. He watches feet. A foot on a tight stair is honest, a test of balance, a check on trust. He frames leather and rubber and the soft whisper of a sock where a cuff rides up. The stair pulls sound into itself. Halfway up, voices lose their edges and turn to felt. He records 5 seconds of that feeling, then pockets the recorder, because pockets are where this project lives. The guide says something careful about what is original and what is restoration. He writes the word careful. A house like this has been many houses, and to pretend otherwise is to erase work someone did with respect. He has a rule for restored spaces: film the joints. Where new meets old is the true story's seam. He leans his lens toward a corner where a fresh peg sits in older wood and lets the focus drift so the eye reads contrast, not claim. At a window, he stops. The glass has that soft, wavering look that makes the outside tilt when you shift your head. He counts slow, then watches the harbour change shape and change back. He films the wavering for exactly the time it takes his breath to go in and out twice. He has found that 2 breaths is the right length for a viewer to trust a frame that sits still. A child behind him whispers that the house is pointy. He writes the word pointy because it is right. Adults often reach for longer words and miss the target by an inch. Pointy gets the work done. A hearth holds cold ash in a curve. He resists the urge to put a hand near it to pretend he can feel heat a century late. He looks at the iron instead, the soot line that never quite leaves, the handle bright where someone loved it by accident. The guide mentions ship timber and merchants and a time when rooms were smaller on purpose. He notes how bodies adjust. Shoulders draw in by instinct. Voices go down without a sign asking. People honor constriction with silence. He files the behavior away. Later, in the Borden house, narrowness will ask the same favor and offer a different return. In a chamber with a low ceiling, he stands back and lets the group pass through him like a tide. He photographs the space after the last heel leaves the frame. Emptiness has more detail than most of us admit. Air sits in the spots where people were a breath ago, and the room holds the imprint like a cooled sheet. He records the slow return of floor noise to 0. The clicks stop, then the shivers, then the faint murmur that must have been his own thoughts. He waits an extra 2 beats and earns a reward, a quiet pop, from wood making peace with weather. He writes, pop, settle, good. Outside again the grounds feel both staged and sincere. The garden is neat in a way that calms the mind before a list. He sits on a bench and writes one. What the house gives: angles, joints, stair hush, glass that wavers, rules read aloud, shoulders adjusting, iron polished by unaware love. What he must not take: private grief, a child's face, a guide's personal story, a claim about what happened, where if the paper does not back it. He underlines that last line and draws a small box. Inside it, he writes the pocket rule again: care before fear. He is not here to win an argument or to make a town wear a mask for him. He is here to understand what ordinary materials do to time when people keep them. He walks the perimeter once more. The clapboard skin shows a pattern he has not noticed yet. Nails like a constellation, cork like a pale river between planks. He frames it flat and lets a gull cross the top edge without chasing the bird. Movement at the edge, stillness in the center. He has used that ratio in rooms and on streets. It works on walls too. A couple passes and talks about pie. He wishes them pie in his head. Wishing strangers small goodnesses is a way to keep your own lens kind. Back inside, the guide mentions an author and a story that put this place into another kind of map. He won't say the names in his notes. He writes instead that stories make coordinates where roads cannot. A book and a building shake hands across time. He films a spine on a shelf and a dust curl in sun. He photographs nothing with a title. He doesn't need the title to do the work. The shot of paper and light will carry the idea without a brand. On the last turn, the stare down is steeper than the mind thinks, and he holds the rail with deliberate plainness so the body is honest on camera if it shows. Honesty in small things buys him credit later when a difficult line needs to land. The exit door opens to a patch of bright noon that feels like walking into a page with no ink. He blinks, and lets the day redraw his edges. A bell rings from a place he can't see. He doesn't hunt the bell, he carries the sound as a weight on the next shot. He likes when a sound from elsewhere floats in. Elsewhere is a friend of unease. He stays a few minutes near the water and records rope sounds and flag snaps. He keeps the mic low to avoid the wind's false thunder. A ferry horn folds into the gulls. He writes, "Horn plus gull, scale." Scale will help when he cuts from a dark room to an outside wide and needs the body to expand its breath the right amount. He tucks the recorder away and checks his pockets. Keys, cards, battery, ID, cash, respect. Tap, 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 tap. Habit holds the day together. He walks back toward town through a thinner street and passes a door with a simple closed sign hung slightly crooked. He photographs the string, not the word. The string knows more about the day than the sign. He thinks about the hours ahead, the witch house interior, if the line is fair, or the Pem galleries for quiet if not. He is not married to sequence. Sequence is what you plan so the day can break it gently. He writes a small note for the viewer he has in mind. If you need a corner today, take it. He frames a bench under a tree to use as that corner later. A corner is a promise you can keep without speaking. Before he leaves the neighborhood, he looks back once. The house does not look back. Houses don't. But the light on the timber has changed by a shade, and a cloud moves its hand across the roof like someone smoothing a blanket. He feels the ordinary steadiness that makes his kind of horror work, the sense that the world is fine right now and that being fine is not a guarantee. He thanks the guide without making it a scene and steps into the street where modern tires whisper and a car rattles over a seam in the brick. He writes, "Seam, rattle, return." Then he turns toward the next stop with the ease of someone who knows that every good day needs at least one place where the light failed and one place where it held. He lets the town get a little louder before he goes to the Black House, because a crowd outside helps him hear what the interior does to silence. The building sits with its face toward the street and its elbows tucked in, angles meeting like firm handshakes. He stands across the way first and counts diamonds in one window, 5 high, 4 wide, then counts again because counting calms. A queue forms, loose and patient. He reads the posted rules, no flash. Stay with the rope lines, be mindful of floors and beams. He likes when rules are written in plain words. Plain words make good neighbors for heavy history. He checks his pocket list without looking, keys, cards, battery, ID, cash, respect, and taps each once so his hands remember. Then he joins. At the threshold he pauses and watches the door. It's thick and dark and carries a shallow polish where palms land. People call things original when they want gravity. He writes a different word, used. Used things tell more truth. The hinge has a tone, low, metal with a little dust in it. He notes hinge, low, dusty, and steps in with his weight even, so any creak belongs to the house, not to a heel jab. The air is cooler by 2 degrees and smells like the inside of an old cabinet. Wood, oil, linen, nothing spooky, just maintenance stretched across time. A docent sets the pace with a voice that keeps a steady level. He doesn't chase dates right away. He listens for intervals, the length between facts, the places a story rests. Rhythm is a kind of floor you can walk without looking. The first room is square and close. He frames edges instead of center, beam, corner, jam, because edges are where rooms admit what they're made of. He photographs a joint where 2 timbers meet at an angle that isn't perfectly true anymore. He lets the lens see the gap but not accuse it. Wood moves, that's not a flaw, it's a calendar. A label talks about a man who served as a magistrate when the town went hard against its own people. He does not film the label. He copies 3 nouns and 1 verb into the notebook and leaves space under them, not for drama but for later reading. He has a rule here: show the material, let the paper show the names. He keeps those rules because someone's grief lives under these ceilings, and he can't be the person who drags grief into the light like a prop. Rope lines guide a path through the next room. He holds the camera near his chest and points it at hands instead of faces. A hand touches a banister and then pulls back without thinking. That recoil is honest. He waits for the room to forget him and records the sound of air moving at the floor. Old houses breathe low. He has learned to put the mic where the boards meet the wall and listen for a thin river of cool. He writes, "Breathe at baseboard," and smiles in the kind of way that no one sees, the kind you make when a puzzle piece slides home. If he needs a sound later to show patience, baseboards will give it. A narrow stair climbs into dim. He does not rush for the camera angle everyone grabs. He watches feet. Rubber soles make a hush, leather taps. A child's shoe catches on a rise that is a half-inch higher than the last one. He films the pause, foot caught, small recalculation, then up. That is the story he wants, not a legend, but a body thinking with a stare, built for another century's stride. The banister is smooth in 2 stripes where hundreds of hands cut their own rails with touch. He passes his palm lightly and immediately writes down what he felt so he doesn't have to say it later. You shouldn't try to force feeling into words while you're still standing inside a feeling. Let the room sit. Let the notebook hold it. The upstairs chamber is lower. People lean their heads because the ceiling invites it. He frames a corner where the plaster meets timber and has been patched in a square the size of a folded towel. New meets old right there, visible and modest. He's said it before and writes it again. Film the joints. That's where the house tells the truth about time. A small window throws a square of pale light onto a rough table. He lets the square slide down the edge for 15 seconds and counts his breath. 2 in, 2 out. Viewers at home breathe with frames they trust. He trusts squares. He tries a soft pan and rejects it. The square wants stillness. He gives it. A label mentions household work, ordinary work that keeps people alive. He writes ordinary work during extraordinary fear and draws a line under it. That line will help him later when he pairs a calm kitchen shot with a heavier sentence about files and charges and signatures. He does not say a judge's name on camera. He shoots the handle on a drawer instead, and the way the handle shines where thumbs found it. He can add the name in the description later, where a viewer can choose it, not have it pressed on them while they're trying to sleep. Sleep is part of his craft. If a story is going to keep someone company at 2 in the morning, it can be responsible for its own volume. A group enters with soft chatter. He moves to one side, lowers the camera, and watches shoulders. In tight rooms, shoulders talk. They draw inward when a fact lands. They lift when a joke gives relief. They square when a guide asks a question. He notes an almost synchronized lift at one line and writes, "Lift, relief, shoe 7. 7 seconds after a hard line, people allowed themselves to let go. That number will help him build a beat in voiceover later. Heavy sentence, count to 7, give them a door latch or a window latch, then continue. Down the stair again, he holds the rail and tests a creak. The house speaks in syllables. One step says a shrug, another says a question. He doesn't force meanings, he names motions. Shrug, question, long sigh near the bottom where boards overlap a support that is tired by afternoon. At the foot, he stops to let the group pass. The rope line curves, he studies the curve. Rope in a museum is both barrier and bridge. It keeps hands off and tells you where to look. He films the rope, tight on the little metal hook, then defocuses until light turns it into a pale river. A viewer will feel the barrier without being shoved against it. Back near the door, a small nook holds a few objects people expect to see. He keeps the lens away. Expectation can be a loud liar. He turns instead to a wall where paint has been reapplied in a flat, honest coat. New paint in an old house is care, not betrayal. He records 30 seconds of new paint holding old boards together and thinks about the stories that like to pretend everything sat untouched. Untouched is a fantasy. Lived in is the truth. He wants the truth even when it looks like a paint roller. He steps outside into bright day and lets the house resize itself from inside measure to street measure. On the stoop he turns and films the threshold from 3 feet away, stone, wood, heel, shadow, so he can cut from interior hush to exterior noise with a moment that belongs to both. Then he crosses to the opposite curb and writes a single, negative space question in square letters. If a judge's house is this plain, what noise did the paperwork make? He leaves 2 lines blank after it, so the edit can breathe. He moves to the side yard and sits on a short wall to file the ethics while they're fresh. What he took: angles, joints, stairpace, rope curves, light on table, new on old. What he left: faces, grief, names without paper, claims about which beam heard what. He writes no borrowed ghosts in the margin and boxes it. He's not here to make a haunting. He's here to show how ordinary materials hold pressure and how pressure changes people. That's enough. It's more than enough. A tour group streams past in costume pieces that don't care about the calendar. He doesn't sigh. The city can be 2 things. He films the shadows of hats on the pavement instead of the hats themselves and earns a better shot for it. Shadows tell without stealing. He walks the block once, slow, until the house becomes background and a new edge appears, a museum banner down the street that promises quiet galleries and climate control. He has learned to pair hard rooms with soft ones, old wood with clean white walls. Too much timber and your thoughts start to splinter. He points his shoes toward the Peabody Essex, not for facts, but for breath. At the corner, he stops for a last look at the black face and the diamond panes. He counts diamonds again, 5 by 4, and lets the number sit in his chest like a stone that is not heavy, just present. He has now held the house from 3 distances, across the street, inside the seam of a beam, and back across the street again. That triangle of views helps him tell it without pretending to be its keeper. He writes triangle, street, seam, street, and circles it. Then he puts the notebook away, touches the phone where the checklist hides under tape, and walks toward a glass door that slides open with a hush engineered on purpose. Some hush is accident, some is design. Both are useful. Both are honest in their own way. He reaches the glass door that knows how to open without a sound and lets it make the decision for him. The lobby breathes cool on purpose, engineered air, even light, a floor that tells the shoe how to behave. He's here for quiet, not for facts, though facts live here too, and wait politely on walls. A sign explains tickets in clear type. He reads every line because reading in a calm place slows the pulse and sets the meter for the next hour. A small beep marks his entry, a wristband tug, the soft pop of a locker closing 3 people away. He notes beep, wrist, locker, and puts the notebook away so his hands are free to do nothing. White rooms resize the day. After timber and rope, a square gallery feels like a reset button. He stands still just inside the first threshold and lets the ears catch up to the eyes. Museums hum on a frequency like distant water. It is climate control, not magic. He respects the hum. It levels the mix. He sets the camera to the lowest visible gain and raises it only to chest height, then not at all, then back to waist, as if he were breathing with it. He has ethics here, no faces, no full captures of art with rights he doesn't own, no angles that could be used to sell what isn't his. He films edges, labels corners, shadows cast by frames, light pooling on a bench. He writes, "Edge not image," to keep himself in line. A security guard steps through the room at a measured pace that belongs to the floor plan. He watches the shoes, not the face. Soft rubber, a slight squeak that repeats on tile seams, the exact pattern of a route learned by steps. He writes route, seam, squeak at the bottom of a page that will not be public and is nobody S to buy. He's here to learn how a steady watch feels in a place built for looking. Later, when a house asks for patience around a door that's stuck once in the middle of a bad hour, he will know how to show patience without saying the word. In a case by the wall, paper sits under glass. He does not read it on camera. He watches the reflection the paper throws back at lights above and the way that reflection refuses to settle. A small shift of the head moves a bright line right and left over a date that might be older than most of a street outside. He films only the bright line and the edges of script to say, "Record exists, not this is the record." He does not borrow weight. He lets a viewer hear the word paper without seeing a page. Then he leaves room in the voiceover for anyone who wants to look things up in their own time. He crosses to a bench and does the thing many people skip, sits on it for 1 full minute with the camera off. Benches are part of the design of thought. A body that stops moving hears better. The hum returns. A child laughs in a way that does not bounce off walls because these walls know how to soften corners. He counts the slow lights in the ceiling, not to gather a number he'll need, but to be an account. Counting calms. 7 long panels, 2 short, return vents like neat mouths. He writes, panels, 7 long, 2 short, vents, and draws a tiny plan, so his later edit can breathe in squares. He walks into a gallery where artifacts sit with a foot of air on all sides. Space around an object is a sentence break. He films the space, not the object. A glass case holds a small tool that once did work. He finds the reflection of a passerby in the case and frames only the ripple of movement, a human shape turned to water, passing by a tool that outlived an owner. He writes, reflection over tool. People pass, work remains. That's a line he can use in Borden without naming names. Work remains. Flaws tell you so. Flaws tell. A wall text talks softly about context and care. He copies one simple pair of words, on loan. On loan is the ethics of holding. On loan means you don't own the thing you are using to say something true. He boxes the pair and adds town, house, story. Also on loan. He thinks about Salem itself as a set of holdings, not his, not anyone's alone. Held, shared, returned. He slows his feet until the souls forget they are in a museum and become the quiet version of walking. In a long gallery, glass cases make a corridor. Glass is a friend of horror when you don't treat it like a mirror. He holds the lens a little off axis so his own body doesn't come home in the shot, then focuses on the line where glass meets metal, joints again. Joints are where time shows itself, even in new buildings. He shoots the clean seam for 10 slow seconds and writes new joint old houses in the margin with a small arrow between. He is building a bridge no one will see, only feel, when he cuts from a seam here to a seam where plaster gave up in a Fall River bedroom. He passes a display of ship models. Ropes sit in tiny coils. He hears the word rope and sees the rope line in the witch house and the ferry rope by the harbour and the velvet rope that will stand between him and a Victorian bed tomorrow. Rope is just rope until you ask it to carry a rule. He films a coil from overhead, just the circle and a shadow, and notes circle of keep back, not to be clever, but to keep his own mind honest about why he keeps shooting the same shapes. A hard floor hands him back the tap of a cane from 2 rooms over. He can't see the person, he doesn't need to. The sound of a cane adds age to a place whether or not the cane belongs to a person who is old. Tools of walking put time in a room. He records 10 seconds of the cane's beat filtered through distance. It will land quietly under a hallway later, and most people will never notice why that hallway feels like it has years in it. He turns into a darker wing where the light falls in pools. Pools of light organize the eye's patience, like bowls on a table. He sets the camera down on the strap against his chest and simply stands, letting the rhythm of visitors write itself. Approach, pause, whisper, step away, approach. He will use the pattern, not the people. A guard folds hands at the small of the back, motionless for a count, then moves. He writes, hands, at ease, move, and thinks about how many people have learned how to be still for other people, looking. He finds a stair within the museum with a gentle rise and a metal rail that is warm under the hand. No camera. Hands remember better without a viewfinder. He listens for voices rising up the stairwell. Stairwells inside museums erase vowels. Edges of words survive, the consonants that tell you a language even when you can't hear the content. He records 3 breaths of consonants because a hallway tomorrow will need that texture when a narrator says something ordinary that hurts a little. A small cafe space lives at one edge of the plan. He doesn't film cups. He films the line of a tray rail and a stack of napkins that somebody squared, as if squaring were a job that mattered. It is. Squared things agree with the nervous system when the rest of the day has been angles. He drinks water and writes water, plain. Sweet things set the ear on fire in a way that hurts room tone. He has learned to keep sugar for after files are closed. On the way out, he stops at the threshold the same way he did coming in. Museums are about thresholds as much as they are about objects. In, you agree to look at one thing at a time. Out, the world throws the whole basket back at you. He films his own shoes crossing from the quiet tile to the loud brick of the street. Shoes can be anybody's in a frame like that, and that is good. The video is for company, not for identity. The day outside has moved along. The town runs warmer now. He lets the bright return slowly by looking down first. Shadow line, curb seam, leaf caught in a drain. And then up, building tolerance for color and noise like someone opening their eyes after a nap. He stands still long enough to hear the museum hum fade behind him and the Salem mix climb back in. A bus sigh, a laugh, a wheel over brick. He writes, hum, fade, world, rise. He checks the notebook for what's left. Evening will ask for a walk that belongs to the town, lantern light, a voice in the open air, simple streets telling stories to feet. He will book the version that keeps to public routes and leaves houses to their owners. He writes, pick a guide who uses dates like handholds, not like weapons. Then he traces a small rectangle in the margin and labels it pocket corner, viewer rest. He will need one easy bench shot before the night gathers, 30 seconds of nothing that isn't nothing, to let a viewer put their own thoughts back in order. He taps the checklist on the back of his phone, keys, cards, battery, ID, cash, respect, and points his shoes toward the square where the lantern groups gather. A bell rings somewhere he cannot see. He carries the sound instead of chasing the source. If the day has a theme, it is this: let the world come to you at the pace it already keeps. He walks without hurry, and the light starts to learn its evening shape. He stands at the edge of the square where small groups collect around warm points of light. Guides raise lanterns, some true flame in glass, some careful LEDs shaped to feel old. And the town chooses a quieter voice for a few hours. He looks for the guide who posts ground rules before stories, the one who uses dates like a handrail. He finds her. She checks a list, stamps a small card, and says the things he wants to hear. Stay to the right, cross only on the signal, keep off fences and stones, no flash, and if the line feels heavy, say so, and we'll take a breath. He writes rules first in his notebook and tucks it away. He keeps to the back third of the group, where a camera can work without catching anyone's face, and lets the lantern draw the first circle of night around them. The guide begins with a time and a street name, not a legend. He times her rhythm the way he timed the museum. Opening line, pause for feet to settle, then a set of plain facts with one detail he can hold in the palm. How the bricks under their shoes were set, how the curb line has moved by inches since a year she names. He writes brick, lip, inches, and marks the seconds between her sentences. A bus sighs 2 streets over. The lantern throws a soft oval on coats and elbows. He films the oval, not bodies, and keeps the lens low enough that all you see is light on brick, the gentle drift of shoes, and the shadow of the guide's hand as she points without touching anything. They cross at a signal that ticks like a metronome taught to keep secret. He records 1 full cycle, walk tone, quiet, red hand, quiet, and files the sound under hallway beds because a click like that can carry a viewer under a roof later without saying hallway. He counts the group because counting calms. 12, then 13 when a late person jogs up, out of breath, whispering sorry. 14 when someone with a stroller peels in from the curb and finds the end of the line. He holds the number 14 for a minute, then lets it go. Numbers in the field are like birds. You hold them gently or not at all. They stop at a corner where the wind threads the blocks. The guide draws a rectangle in the air with her finger. A building that was a court, then a store, then a set of offices, and through those changes, a hinge. He listens for the hinge in her voice, the place where the story swings from ordinary to the hour the town still argues with. She does not raise her volume to sell it. He marks the restraint and writes, restraint, trust. He films a door jamb across the street, the paint rubbed thin where palms have landed for years. He does not film faces paused in listening. He uses the jamb as a proxy for attention. A viewer will feel the pause without being bared to strangers. At the fence of a churchyard, he stands even with the rope and reads the sign that says the ground is closed after dusk. He keeps his lens on the chain links and the leaves that have settled along the bottom rail like small boats refusing to go farther. The guide does not take the group inside. She tells the story from the edge, names, a calendar of bad weeks, a docket that grew because people were afraid of one another. He writes edge, ethic, in a small box. He watches how the lantern light tests the fence and gives up without complaint. Boundaries are also systems. He respects this one. They move again, shuffling softly. A pair of teenagers in plastic fangs asks another group for directions and laughs at their own joke when they get answers in a language none of them speak. The town is 2 places at once and handles it better than outsiders think. Farther down, a bar door swings and lets out a puff of warm music. It lasts exactly as long as the hinge arc, then the night seals itself. He records the hinge and the seal. Later, if a cut needs a breath, he can lay that sound under a still frame of rope or stair and let the ear do the work without a single word. At the memorial he set aside earlier, he stays on the outer path. The guide uses the right voice here, low, factual, slow at the line breaks where dates sit. He watches the shadow of a branch move across one bench like a hand that cannot make up its mind. He films only the shadow and the stone's edge. He writes, names, live off camera, shadows do the work. The lantern halo falls short of the far end. Darkness holds its own ground without being pushed back or forward. He trusts the dark to carry its share. He does not try to light what is not his. They take a lane that smells like cinnamon and cold smoke. Somebody is selling cones of sugared nuts ahead. Somebody else smokes under a sign that says no smoking, edging a foot into a side street so the letter of the rule survives. He notes the real life mixing with the tour and feels relieved. If a night has only one flavor, it doesn't ring true. The guide tells a short thing about a house that leaned, a builder who corrected it, and a rumor the correction started. She shows where the rumor likes to point, and then points instead to a record that says otherwise. He writes rumor left, record right, and draws 2 arrows. He likes when a small correction lets the air out of a dramatic balloon without embarrassing the person who wanted the drama. Kind guides are good for towns. At a pause by a brick wall that holds the day's heat, he takes his pocket corner for viewers. He frames 30 seconds of nothing that isn't nothing, just the curve where brick meets sidewalk, a tiny fern in a mortar gap, the glow of the lantern reaching the toe of a boot, and no farther. He counts his breath while the guide gives people a minute to check phones, adjust scarves, and hush a child. He will drop this shot between 2 heavier lines tomorrow. A piece of quiet needs a home. They approach a house front that keeps its lights modest. The guide calls attention not to a legend, but to the way the windows have been rebuilt, old frames, new storm panes, and how that choice changes what the house hears at night. He hadn't thought to listen to a storm window, but there it is, a thin whistle when wind catches the edge at a certain angle. He writes, whistle, storm edge, and records 5 seconds of the sound with his hand cupped to block louder traffic. That noise will sit under a hallway later like a distant kettle that never boils. Noise lifts 2 streets over and floats toward them. Laughter, a car horn, someone calling a name with certainty, as if the name will cross every obstacle. The group turns a corner and loses half of it. Towns are kind that way, they edit for you. He listens for the low band, the part of the night that stays even when the rest changes, ventilation hum, far ocean, tires on wet brick. He captures the bed of it and labels it bass tone Salem. Beds help voice over land without sounding like it hovers. The guide brings them to a house that wears a story people buy on weekends. She does not scold anyone who expects a thrill. She notes the claims, says which ones were written down when, and shows how the street grid moved so the address a pamphlet loves is not exactly where people think. He writes grid shift and draws a narrow rectangle to mark the old line. He is not going to use the rectangle in the cut. It is for him, so he won't overclaim later out of laziness. Maps matter most when they are boring. A gust lifts the flame inside the guide's glass and makes it lean. The group leans too, almost laughing, almost worried for a second, and then the flame rights itself because glass is a system designed to help. He films the lean right and the writing and labels it Lantern Recovery 03. 3 seconds for a small fear to pass. He wants that number for a sentence tomorrow that needs a measured pause before the relief arrives. They stand at the lip of a small green where a bronze figure watches without looking down. He keeps the camera on the pedestal's corner and the 2 screws that have been turned and turned until the slots line the same way, a human urge toward order in a world that refuses much of it. The guide asks the group for a wish the town might keep, not a wish for themselves. People say things like less shouting and safer sidewalks at night. He does not film or record. He only listens and lets the wishes fill a pocket in his coat that will never go on screen. Some content should stay human and unedited. The tour ends without a flourish, just the steady cadence back to the square, a thank you, an invitation to read more, a reminder to tip if it felt right, and a quiet lowering of the lantern as if closing a book. He tips with the same plain shape of thanks he used in the cafe and folds the stamp card into his notebook. He writes what the night gave, rules first, edges not centers, record over rumor by naming the record, silence carried by design, and accident both, a storm window whistle, 3 seconds for a small fear to pass, wishes that belong to the mouths that made them. He writes what he left, faces, grief, any claim that needed a signature and didn't have one. Walking back alone, he keeps to lit blocks out of habit, not because the town is hostile, but because a steady plan lets the brain save its juice for seeing. He stops once to record an empty street for 15 seconds, no one in it, just the sweet scrape of a flag on a pole and a distant dishwasher thump through a back door. He tucks the sound into the night's pocket. At the room, he closes the curtain to half, so the shade bar makes one line across the wall. He lays the cards out, backs them up twice, labels both with the date and the city, and checks batteries without looking, listening for the soft clicks that say, seated, seated, seated. He writes a single negative space question at the bottom of the page and leaves blank lines under it. How much of night is the part we make on purpose so we can look at the rest? He turns the lamp to its lowest click. Outside, someone laughs once, not unkindly. Inside, the room returns to itself and lets him sleep. He leaves Salem before the shops wake, when the streets look like they're holding their breath between sweepers and first coffee. The pack is square, the cards are backed up twice, and the ritual on the phone still waits for a finger, keys, cards, battery, ID, cash, respect. Tap, 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 tap. He moves with the kind of quiet that makes hallways softer for neighbors. Out on the road, the town steps back and lets the map take over. He doesn't say highway names into the recorder. He notes what travel really feels like. White lines that tick like a metronome for tired eyes, green signs that arrive sooner than you expect and leave faster. Wipers, testing a windshield once and deciding they're done for now. He prefers a small car that doesn't argue, a vent fan that can whisper, and a seatbelt click that sits under the audio like a clean period. Fuel and coffee happen at the same place. He films only hands, the pull of a nozzle, the squeeze of a lever on a paper cup, a lid that snaps down flat with a sound that says, sealed. Gas stations are also systems, rubber mats that catch drips, a trash can that eats straw wrappers, a register beep that means a shift agreed to change hands 3 hours ago. He doesn't show logos or faces. He shoots a receipt curling on a warm printer and tucks it in the notebook as a timestamp made by a stranger. The road runs south and then west, trees exchanging their thin night outline for flat daytime color. He lets other drivers pass. There is nothing to win on asphalt when the day already promised a house. Bridges mark a change in thinking. Water under a span tells the body it is crossing an idea as much as a place. He lowers the music and lets the low band of the world take the seat next to him. Tire tone, fan motor, distant truck. In the mirror, a siren becomes a small ribbon, and then is gone. He breathes like a person who wants to arrive with enough patience left to listen. On a long, straight run, he does what he always does before a sight that carries more weight than the materials should. He says the pocket rule in a voice only the glass hears. Care before fear. He underlines it with his thumb on the steering wheel like he's writing on nothing. The rule is not poetry to make him brave. The rule is a tool to keep from borrowing someone else's pain for a cut. The land starts to wear brick and smoke on its shoulders, old mills with windows like rows of teeth that once bit on daylight for a living. He rolls the window down 2 inches to let the smell of a river learn his car's interior. Rivers in work towns have their own dictionary: iron, damp wood, algae, hot brake pad from the next lane over, soap from a plant that still runs across the water. He films none of it yet. He watches for chimneys that don't smoke anymore and hears how silence collects around them at noon. A mill town is a clock with half its hands still moving. The half that stopped is the part people point to in articles. The half that runs is how residents buy dinner. He writes that line down so he will be honest later, when the script tries to lean too hard on a single photograph. Fall River begins in small repeats: 3-story houses with stacked porches, corner stores with 2 machines humming, crosswalks where paint has faded but refuses to resign. He keeps to the posted speeds as if the signs were for him personally. A town reads how you drive. He passes a block where laundry lines run like staff paper behind a triple-decker. The shirts lift and fall. He photographs only the clothespins in a row, wood against sky, and labels the frame. Living goes on. He takes the turn he has studied without broadcasting it, and lets the address arrive like any ordinary number would, because that's what numbers do. They show up without fanfare and sit on a mailbox while people make dinner within earshot of stories they didn't choose. He parks where the sign tells him and keeps the camera low when he steps out. There is a schedule here: tours on the quarter hour, a desk where a pen rests with a small chain, a bell that does not ring often but rings politely when it has to. He takes a breath before pushing the door, like a guest who knows the kitchen has already had a day of it. Inside, the light changes to house light, neither museum white nor lantern warm, but the kind of medium that lives in cathedrals of ordinary, hallways, front rooms, sleeping rooms. He does not film the first minute. He learns the air. He reads the posted notes without rushing. Where to stand, what is allowed, what is not. He signs what needs signing with a steadiness that would not shame a counterclerk. The person at the desk gives a practiced smile that is not false. He returns it with the same care and puts money where money belongs. Houses like this stay standing because people do simple things every day: open, close, mop, explain. While he waits for the next group, he walks the perimeter outside, only his side of the sidewalk, not onto anyone's grass, and he counts. 1, the front step; 2, the left window; 3, the right, a porch column with a hairline crack, a paint line that doesn't match exactly because 2 years and a different can of white came between coats. He shoots the paint join flat, just the seam, no frame more dramatic than a seam. He writes, "Film the joints," and under it, as he did in Salem, "New meets old tells the truth." He finds the plaque that names the place for visitors and photographs the screws that hold it, cross slots at slightly different angles because no one thought to line them for a camera. The lack of staging is a kind of mercy. This house has spent enough energy in other people's stories. It does not need gloss now. A bus rolls by 3 streets over and lays a bass note under the block. He records 10 seconds of the bus that never appears on screen. Street tone matters. A neighbor rakes. He does not film the neighbor. He films the rake leaning against a fence for a moment while the person stops to tie a shoe. A delivery truck idles wrong for a bit, is asked by a voice you cannot hear to kill the engine, and kills it. Quiet returns the way quiet always returns, by edges first, middle, last. He sets the lens on the house number. Numbers carry a weight in this story. He does not say the street name aloud. He does not have to. Those who know will know, and those who don't can sleep without a jolt of over-specificity. This channel is for company, not jolts. The group gathers. He steps back from the doorway and lets others go in first. He looks at their shoes because shoes tell you how a tour will feel. Sensible soles mean balance. He counts 2 pairs of heels, 1 set of flip-flops he hopes will be okay on old stairs, and 6 shoes with soft bottoms that will read the floors without hurting them. He makes a note to walk softer than all of them. The guide sets a tone he wants. Calm voice, facts first, rumor named as rumor, record named as record. He feels the impulse to start describing rooms already, but he holds the words. His camera does the old job, thresholds, latches, the idea of a floor plan. He will draw the plan later from memory, not to prove he knows the angles, but to show viewers how the mind tries to sort ordinary spaces into safety and fails by an inch in places like this. He takes 1 more lap along the sidewalk before the call. He looks up at an upstairs window and then does the honest thing. He films the sill, not the glass, and the way white paint has aged to cream at the lower edge, a slow conversation between weather and wood. He lifts the mic waist-high into air that smells like a clean hallway after morning, though it is not morning anymore. Houses have their own noon even when the sun disagrees. He notes a porch board with a higher note than its neighbor. Tap, tap, tap. The middle one sings a quarter step up. He will test the same thing inside. If the notes match, he will have a line. Places echo themselves. Back in the car for a half-minute, he writes a small ethics card and tucks it behind his phone. What I take: sound, joints, thresholds, stairs, labels, measurements, the weight of a hinge. What I leave: faces, grief, reenactments, claims without paper. He underlines leave twice. He has learned across towns that leaving is a kind of taking care. In a kitchen window across the street, a curtain breathes. He doesn't make poetry at it. He writes curtain breath, and then the time. The time matters because tomorrow, when he sits with edits, he will need to know whether that was wind or a person passing on the other side. When the call for the next tour sounds, he closes the notebook and stands with his hands open, not a grip and not a fold, so the house can see he means to behave. He will follow where the rope says. He will move with the group like a current you barely notice, and he will let the old floor tell him how light a step can be. He feels the ordinary nervousness a person feels when entering any stranger's home. Do I belong? Will I hurt something by accident? Will I understand what I'm told? He writes in his head the only answer that has ever helped: belong by behaving. Keep your hands off. Listen first. The door opens with a sound he has heard in 100 places and in none. The group passes in, and he with them, into a diagram that looks like a family house and refuses to calm down. He enters with the group and lets the house set the pace. The air is plain, soap, old wood, a quiet cool that comes from shade, and old plaster, not a machine. A guide greets them with a voice that belongs to rooms like these, steady, not theatrical, mindful of feet. Rules first: stay with the rope lines, no flash, mind the stairs, questions welcome, respect the neighbors and the hours. He nods without writing, then writes later. Rules first: house voice, steady. The front hall is narrower than his memory from photos. Narrow halls do something to breaths. They stack them. He counts 7 floorboards across between skirting boards, then corrects to 8 because one hides under the runner. The runner swallows steps better than bare wood. He films the edge where runner meets tread and lets the rest of the hall be. A framed picture hangs at shoulder height. He doesn't shoot the picture. He shoots the nailhead above it, bright, from 1,000 small changes, used, not original. He keeps that word, used, because it tells more truth. The guide gestures to the front parlor. Rope lines define a rectangle of don't cross. Rope in houses is different from rope in museums. Here it feels less like display, more like a boundary drawn to keep the day from spilling into a place that still means something. He records the rope curve and the brass hook that holds it. A mantle sits with plain restraint. A clock waits on it, not ticking. He measures the silence around that non-tick. Silence is a number if you let it be. No tick for 15 breaths. He notes, clock, rest, 15. He doesn't film the couch. He films the fabric texture where sunlight finds a ridge and a thread lifts up. Thread tells time honestly. It pulls back from fingers and years. A table leg takes a light scratch near the foot. He frames only the scratch. People tell stories with gouges they didn't mean to make. He does not narrate those stories here. He writes scratch, low, near foot, nothing else. From the hall he watches a door that doesn't line with its partner. Two doorways, almost aligned, almost. The mind wants doors to agree. When they don't, the mind works harder. He keeps the camera level and lets the frame discover the slight misalignment, not as a trick, but as a record of how older houses grow like trees on one side more than the other. He notes door off by a finger. Little off hurts more than big off in ordinary rooms. They pass into the sitting room the way a story passes into a second act. No drum, only a threshold. He photographs the threshold, wood on one side lighter, on the other darker, where sun works the grain different. A rug stops short. He films the stop. Rug, wood, seam. The guide names dates and kin. He copies none of the names now. He copies instead the length of her pauses between facts. 3, then 2, then 5. Those numbers will keep his voice from rushing later. He has learned to use other people's pacing like a ladder. Windows face a street that lives its own day. A truck goes past far slower than city trucks, like it already knows not to be rude here. He records 3 seconds of that slow pass and labels it street, respect. A fly finds the glass and tests the corner. He films the test, not the fly, so all you see is a soft dot move like a thought you can't quite catch. He smiles without showing teeth. The day gives you symbols if you don't hunt them. The dining room holds more air than he expected. He leans into a corner the rope allows and frames a chair back, a plate rail, a wall where wallpaper pattern repeats and then loses a row in a shadow. He counts the repeat, tulip, leaf, tulip, leaf, 4 spans to the corner, then 3.5 on the return. Imperfect repeats soothe more than perfect ones in workhouses. He writes, repeat, soft, imperfect. A door here locks from a side that makes sense only if you know how people used the rooms. He films the escutcheon and the keyhole, then the key if permitted, then not the key if not. He doesn't borrow privilege from a tour. He stands where the guide points. The kitchen shows up plain and useful. Hooks, a shelf, a table that has had every kind of morning and still stands mid-thigh. The guide names chores. He listens hardest when chores are named because chores tell where people were when nothing was happening except everything. He films a hook without a pan on it. Emptiness is honest. It shows room for work. He writes hook, no pan, and draws a square, one of his pocket corners, to use as a rest between heavier lines later. A back stair lifts narrow and steep enough to ask a body its age. He watches shoes go up, rubber soles whisper. A boot knocks once on a riser that sits a 1/4 inch taller. He catches the knock in audio only. He writes stair, high riser, 1 knock. Landings here are not places to talk. They are places to check your balance. He does not film faces checking. He films the top of the newel post, worn to a soft oval by a century of hands. The oval shines where a thumb finds home without looking. Touch makes topography. Upstairs, the landing holds 3 doors. He tests the floor's notes with the gentlest walk he has. The left board sings a little higher than the right. He writes, "High note, left upper land," and waits until the group spreads so he can hear the boards reset. Houses have rests like sheet music. He learns them by doing nothing for 10 seconds at a time. A front bedroom waits with bedspread square and humble, a window shade that stops an inch high as if the cord and the day have made a deal. He frames the inch of light under the shade. He counts. Light line is 2 fingers tall, 3 long spans from sill to pull ring. He will say none of this out loud later. He will show the line and let breath do the explaining. A connected door sits where many rooms would keep a wall. He studies the latch, not ornate, just a chisel line and a simple plate. He doesn't touch it. He writes, "Latch, center, quiet." Now the floor plan starts its quiet trouble. To reach another bedroom, you pass through a room that would rather be left as a room, not a hall. Rooms that have to be halls get tired. He films the path from one door to the next, with the lens low enough that all you see is rug edge, floor seam, rug edge again. A small angle in the wall near the far corner forces the body to turn a little, and that turn cuts sightlines so a person in the first room cannot see the second without stepping further than feels polite. He writes, "Sightline cut, body turn, 3 degree." The 3 degrees is a guess. The guess is good enough to shape a sentence later. A small turn between rooms changes how people hear each other. He does not stage anything. He does not move a chair. He records the exact place the house asks you to stand if you want to see both doors. It is not at the threshold. It is a step beyond, in the spot where your right shoulder almost grazes a wall. He stands there and lets his own shoulder almost graze. He feels the mind tense at the almost. Almost stacked too, almost aligned doors, almost a hallway, almost seeing, almost hearing. He writes, "Almost stack," and draws 4 small squares in a row. The guest room holds its own quiet weight. A small dressing table faces a mirror that gives the room back to itself with a wobble. He keeps his body out of the mirror by standing off axis and frames only the curve of glass, where silver thins near the edge. Mirrors in old rooms are not for faces. They are for light to pass through and change shape. He shoots the wobble for 2 breaths. 2 is enough. More becomes looking when looking is not the point. The back stairs call a different way down, steeper, tighter, private, when the front is for show. He lets others go first. He records the way voices change on back stairs, vowels leave, consonants click. He thinks of the museum stair yesterday and the way it erased vowels too. He notes stairwell effect, consonants, and draws a line from pem to here. Bridges between places help an edit move without the viewer feeling pushed. On the way toward the rear, a door shows a keyhole big enough to see daylight if someone on the other side stands wrong. He does not test it. He notes, daylight, keyhole, don't, and underlines don't. He doesn't need the trick. He needs the idea. Privacy depended on wood and habit, not on steel. He will find a gentle way to say that later without pressing on anyone's grief. Back on the main floor, the guide offers a pause for questions. He takes none out loud. He asks the house a small thing with his feet. What happens if you stand still in the sitting room doorway and let the street and the dining room talk to you at the same time? The answer comes in layers, a car tire shush from outside, a small refrigerator motor somewhere beyond, someone in another room adjusting a chair leg and then stopping as soon as it scrapes. He writes, shush, motor, scrape, stop. Stops tell as much as sounds. A stop means a person remembered other people exist. He allows himself one diagram in the notebook, a box for the front parlour, a box for the sitting room, a bar that is a rope line, a thinner box for the dining room, a kink where the kitchen claims its corner, and a ladder for the back stairs. He draws the upstairs as two boxes that argue with each other over a door that wants to be a wall and a hallway that doesn't want to be either. He labels nothing with names, only directions: front, back, street, yard. He sits with the diagram for 15 seconds and sees why the mind won't settle. A normal plan asks you to move around center. This plan asks you to move through center and keeps the middle as a place where people had to be who they were with each other, even when they wanted to be apart. He writes, through, not around. Before they leave the interior, he takes one more plain shot of a hinge metal on wood, 3 screws, the paint line kissed onto the plate, used, not original. The screw slots don't match. He refuses the urge to square them in his mind. He lets the mismatch be a small mercy. The house doesn't need to be a symbol. It can be a house. Outside again, he lets the body resize to street scale. The sunlight feels louder. He blinks like anyone would. He records the immediate return of town noise, bus bass note, a laugh at the corner, a rake scratch. He files what he took and what he left, this time as a spoken whisper into the recorder so he'll have to hear it later. Took joints, thresholds, notes, rope, sightlines, stairs, rests, left faces, grief, claims without paper, any reenactment. He says the pocket rule out loud for the first time that day. Care before fear. Saying it in daylight helps. A neighbor crosses with a bag of groceries. He lowers the lens. He films instead the shadow of the grocery bag on the sidewalk. Eggs guessed at by shape, bread by flecks. Living goes on. He writes it again so he won't forget when the edit tempts him to lean too hard on sorrow. Living goes on. The house behind him holds both truths at once, the ordinary and the hour that refuses to settle, and the floor plan is the reason he can say that without pretending. He takes a last breath with the building, not at it. He thanks the guide with the same plain voice he used in Salem and steps back to let the next group enter. The door hinge speaks in that low, dusty tone he has come to recognize as the sound old doors make when they work for the living. He titles the sound in his notes, Work, Not Haunt. Then he pockets the pen and walks the block once around, counting the steps he needs to clear his head. 36 to the corner, 20 to the stop line, 18 back to the front. Numbers settle a mind the way a hand on a rail settles a stair. He has 2 sections left to carry, a cemetery and a waterfront to soften the edges, then a closing build that places this trip where it belongs. In the drawer labeled Ordinary Care, under the tab that says We Listened. He chooses the cemetery in daylight, not for drama but for proof of care. The sign at the gate sets the hours in plain numbers and asks for shoes to keep to paths when the ground is soft. He reads the sign all the way through. Reading the whole sign is part of the work. He sets the camera low before he walks in and keeps the first minute for edges only. Iron post, chain loop, hinge plate with paint lifting like a thumbnail-sized leaf. He writes, hinge, pale flake. Entry, and touches nothing. A grounds truck idles somewhere past the trees. He records 4 seconds of that motor because machines at cemeteries make the place human again. Someone is tending, not haunting. He writes, motor. Care. Gravel underfoot has a dry voice that asks for softer steps. He obeys. The path meets a fork and offers 2 kinds of quiet. Older stones in uneven rows to the left, newer ones clean and low to the right. He does not go straight to the oldest. He turns right first and reads the language that modern cutters use. Serif, sans, dates with hyphens, dates with slashes, a small icon sometimes, a blank space often. He does not film names. He films the margin where grass meets base, the seam where a stone's lower edge learns the shape of weather. He counts drip lines on one base, 1, 2, 3, then stops before the mind starts making patterns to suit itself. Counting helps until it pushes. He writes, "Stop at 3." He finds a bench with a little brass plate and reads the dedication without saying it out loud. The plate has 4 screws. 2 slots line up, 2 don't. He photographs the misalignment as a small mercy and labels it slots, human. A maple leaves shadows across the bench in a slow ladder. He gives the ladder 20 seconds on camera still, so a viewer at home can climb without moving. He keeps faces out of frame by standing with the sun at his back and the bench filling the lower half like a quiet shelf. He will place a heavy sentence over this later, maybe the rule again, maybe a date that asked too much out of a family. A crow drops into grass and starts a careful walk that belongs to crows and no one else. He films only the leg motion, not the head, so the shape becomes a metronome. People think of crows as a signal, but here it is just a bird on a job. He writes, "Crow, work," and keeps moving. At a junction stone, the path numbers change. He takes the smaller loop toward the older section and lets the ground tell him where not to step. Flat markers tilt like closing books. Raised stones lean like old shoulders. He does not correct the metaphors in his head. He refuses to speak them. He notes instead the joints, mortared bases, dry-laid blocks, hairline cracks that have become hairline roots. Small offerings sit where hands left them. Pebbles, a pressed flower, a coin. He doesn't shoot the offerings when names are visible. He turns the lens 90 degrees and frames only the shadow of a coin on stone and the glint that the eye loves even when it is sad. He writes, "Glint, leave it," and leaves it. He does not take shots he has not earned. The project is for company, not for trespass. At a tree that started life after the oldest date on a nearby stone, he films bark close enough that age becomes a set of ridges instead of a number. Time talks without calendars. He will borrow that voice for 10 seconds later. The oldest stones carry their own handwriting, letters chiseled with a hand that didn't know us and did not need to. He keeps his distance and sets the frame on a corner, the serif of a single capital cut down by weather into a soft hook the alphabet still recognizes. He counts to 7 and stops. He writes, serif, soft, 7. A groundskeeper eases by in a cart, looking at the right hand of the path where ruts begin. He lowers the camera and nods. The keeper nods back like someone accustomed to nodding when work and witness meet in the same place. He notes, nod, work, neighbors. A pair of visitors pass, speaking in a language that is not his. He steps aside and takes the next side path into a shade that cools his skin by 1 degree. Shade makes the ear taller. In shade, he hears detail, B, zipper, heel, leaf pull. He records the 4 sounds on separate breaths, B, zipper, heel, leaf pull. He writes them in that order because the order helps a later sentence find its own steady gait. Near a low family plot, an iron chain runs from post to post, 6 spans. He films the links only, counting them from left to right and then right to left, so the mind knows a boundary exists without feeling fenced. He labels the clip, chain, span, 6, return, 6. At the far edge, the land meets water by a wall of stone that has learned to hold itself. He does not step off the cemetery path. He stands where a person would stand if they were visiting and wanted to see the harbor without leaving anyone alone. Wind writes its own quick cursive across the water and erases it. He records no more than 15 seconds. The water is not for him. He will have more water later. He saves the larger room for the larger view and turns back onto the outer loop where a small shed keeps tools in order. He films the rack, rake, shovel, spare handle, broom. Tools align grief with work so days can go on. He writes rack, order, and fights the urge to make this align. Lines are earned by time, not visits. On the way out, he photographs the hours placard and the blank space for closed for services, because the blank space is the most important section of the sign. Blank space admits living priority. He reviews rules in the mind the way he taps the phone checklist. Stay on paths, no staging, no close-ups of fresh grief, names off camera, unless the record itself is the subject. He boxes the last rule in pencil and draws a small square beside it for viewers. He will give them a corner before the street returns. The waterfront is a different kind of ledger. Water keeps dates by rust. He chooses the public side, piers, boardwalk, a railing rubbed by thousands of hands that were not thinking about filming. He films the rub, not the hands. Salt left a white powder on a black bollard, and a rope sits in a coil that looks casual, but was laid by a person who knows the difference between casual and careless. He records the coil from above, so it becomes a circle and a shadow, not a noun. He writes coil. Keep back again, and draws a thin line to the ropes he saw in Salem and the glass seam in the museum. The day has been building a quiet bridge of joints and circles. He crosses without saying so. Gulls write a rough pencil line through the air and argue over nothing. He tries once to catch the bell of a buoy and misses. He tries again and gets it. The bell warms the whole frame with 3 notes that ride under car noise without being swallowed. He writes buoy 3 notes, lands, and tucks the clip away for a voiceover line that needs kindness after a fact. A boat horn flattens the sky for a second and then lets go. Horns are useful for scale. He keeps the horn on a separate track so he can lift or lower the world later to fit the room a viewer is in. He looks for work, not nostalgia. A crew rinses a deck. He films only the rinse, the swish, the drain, the way water runs toward its own plan. A maintenance ladder clanks, a gate complains, a dock plate comes down with a packing blanket. Thud. He notes clank, complain, thud, and sets them in that order, a simple 3 that can carry a transition without needing strings. He avoids logos and faces. He looks for hands and finds them, gloved, quick, practiced. He films a glove wrist turning a small wheel and stops before an arm becomes a person. He will not turn anyone's day into a mood board. Under a bridge, the air changes key. Bridges hum when the city crosses overhead. He frames the seam where concrete meets steel and leaves cars out of it. The hum will tell on them without help. He writes hum, bridge, key change, and gives the hum 10 seconds to write on the microphone. Water slaps the wall with its own intervals. Wind decides length, tide decides weight. He picks a section where slaps come in 4s and films nothing but stone and sound. 4 is the right number when a viewer's chest needs to find its old breathing again. He turns back toward the more open run and lets the horizon do its simple work of calming. Horizon is a tool, not a metaphor if you hold it right. He keeps it straight and low in frame and lets sky be sky without tricks. A flag line taps a mast. He takes 5 seconds and labels it flag, tap, bed. That tap can sit under a hallway at night like a pulse that isn't a heartbeat and won't wake anyone. A sandwich shop door hisses open. He stays with the rail and lets the hiss live out of frame. He eats later. For now he drinks water, plain, and stands still until the big systems, wind, tide, traffic, settle into a pattern he can describe in 3 words. He chooses return by edges. The day has returned to him by edges all day. He writes return by edges and circles it twice. He takes a final cutaway for the packet labelled view arrest, a single cleat tied off right, a knot honest without flourish, rope fuzzed where the world rubbed it. 30 seconds still, no trick. He will put a sentence about the floor plan over this, or not, depending on what the cut asks. He is learning to let cuts ask. He traces the checklist on his phone with his thumb: keys, cards, battery, ID, cash, respect, and adds a new, temporary word at the end: thanks. He doesn't write it on the tape. He says it to himself without making a scene of it. Places here, or they don't. He behaves as if they do. The light tips warmer on the water by a shade only his eye cares about. He keeps the camera in the bag and lets the scene be for him alone while he closes the day's loop. He will drive back the long way so the mind can step down in gears: harbour, bridge, hum, neighbourhood, highway, city noise, room tone. He will file the cards twice. He will label with date and city and one shorthand: stones, water. He will put the ethics card back under the phone so he finds it first thing tomorrow. He will set one negative space question at the bottom of the page and leave a blank under it for the last section to answer. What do we owe to ordinary rooms after we've asked them to hold more than they should? Then he will turn the lamp to its lowest click and let the harbour's bell, now out of range, ring anyway inside his head until it finds rest. He leaves the harbour without hurry and lets the big systems step down in order. Water first, then bridge hum, then neighbourhood breaks, then the soft tunnel of highway where sound smooths into one long ribbon. The car holds the day at arm's length, which is the right distance for looking back without regretting. He doesn't chase thoughts. He lets them form like mile markers. A green sign arrives, leaves. A wiper tests the glass once, decides it's fine. A turn signal ticks like a metronome for patience. He says the pocket rule once into the windshield: care before fear, and lets the words evaporate into road noise instead of becoming a banner. Rules that turn into banners start performing. He needs this one to keep working. He stops once for gas and water, never coffee this late. He films only hands, handle down, nozzle hung, receipt printing, lid on a bottle twisting, until it seals with that small promise sound. He tucks the paper into the notebook as a marker he did not make. Receipts are other people's clocks, and they sit well in files with dates that ask for company. Back on the road, he counts lanes when the mind wanders. 3 open, 1 merging, a shoulder that breathes. Counting calms or it doesn't. Today, it does. He passes places where the map would like him to remember a story someone else keeps. He nods to each without taking anything. Not his lane today. Not his lane. Boston returns by edges, a skyline corner first, then a bridge whose lattice writes its own shadow on the hood, then the blinks and brief beeps of this city's particular machines. He keeps the camera off while the body remembers how to live in crosswalks and elevator doors. He parks, moves with the kind of quiet that leaves neighbors' thoughts unbroken, and lays the small bag on the table the way a person sets a book down they want to keep reading later. The room is itself again: lamp, chair, window, that opens just enough to admit a line of street voice. He cracks it and counts the street in 4s, bus sigh, shoe scuff, far laughter, fridge motor. Then shuts the glass to keep the night from writing over the work. He lays out the cards like a deck he doesn't gamble with. A1 lamp hum and quiet Boston corners. A2 train door dings and a public clock at 7:06. A3 Salem entry, memorial edges, the black house's diamond panes counted 5 by 4. A4 7 Gables joints and stair hush, glass that wavers, shoulders adjusting by instinct. A5 witch house, rope curves, baseboard breath, the way vowels fall away on tight stairs. A6, Pem hum, white rooms breathing on purpose, on loan, boxed and underlined, joints in new buildings filmed like joints in old houses. A7, lantern recovery in 3 seconds, storm window whistle, rule of edges night. A8, southbound bus bass note, laundry pins, a front step that sings a quarter step up. A9, floor plan that won't settle, sightline cut by 3 degrees, almost stacking. A10, stones, water, hinge flake at the gate, coin shadow, buoy bell in 3 notes, coil as a circle that says, keep back, without shouting. He writes the table across 2 pages in plain letters because plain letters carry farther. He backs up twice, first to a drive marked A, then to a twin marked B, labels already taped because labels late are labels you forget. He listens for the little clicks that confirm seated, 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 and lets the comfort of a job with steps take the lead. Transfers done, he writes the short log this project prefers, 1 line per reel and exactly 3 facts per line. Where, what, why. Where, 7 Gables, interior joint. What, new peg in old beam. Focus, drift to read contrast. Why, say restoration is care, not betrayal. He sticks to 3 so the log stays calm at 2 in the morning when the mind runs ahead of itself. On the desk he draws the episode's spine, not scenes, not chapters, not drama. A spine with ribs that breathe. Rib 1, lamps and thresholds, Boston's ordinary proving itself. Rib 2, transit, train, ferry door language, the way a platform tells a foot what to do. Rib 3, Salem, record verse carnival, held side by side with neither winning, because that isn't the job. Rib 4, timber and joints, 7 Gables angles, and the way glass alters truth without lying. Rib 5, edges and ethics, which house rules kept, names off camera, used instead of original. Rib 6, white room hum, on loan principle tied to holding stories like borrowed tools. Rib 7, lantern walk, rule of edges at night, 3 seconds for small fear to pass, wish that belongs to the mouth that made it. Rib 8, southbound, Mill River dictionary, street tone saying living goes on. Rib 9, floor plan, through, not around, sightline math, almost stack. Rib 10, stones and water, care before fear, given form in grounds work and harbour work. Rib 11, return by edges, viewers given a bench, a coil, a bell, a horizon low in frame. Rib 12, close draw, what the trip owes the places, what to take and what to leave named without debate. He listens to rooms again, this time as files. The lamp's hum from section 4 lives at the same comfortable frequency as the museum HVAC from section 7. He marks them as a pair that can trade places under lines to keep the bed steady without sounding like a loop. The buoy bell from the waterfront is a kind friend and can arrive twice if quiet. He marks it rare, which is the opposite of favorite. Favorites get overused. Rares return like a neighbor at the right moment. He turns to the ethic ledger, a page he keeps on every trip that no one else has to see. What he took: joints, thresholds, rope lines, stair notes, breath at baseboards, glass wobble, lantern recovery, storm whistle, wish cadence, bus bass, Mill River dictionary, floor plan misalignment, cemetery hinge flake, coin shadow, coil circle, buoy bell. What he left: faces, grief, fresh names, reenactments, claims without paper, new myths that lean on old hurts, any sound staged to feel like a voice in a room where none belongs. He draws a small square at the bottom labeled viewer rest and lists the corners he owes: bench ladder of light, brick, curb, seam with fern, cleat, as honest knot. 3 is enough. 3 gives a mind a choice without making it pick. He drafts the voice scaffolding in pencil so the edit can breathe. The open will be a simple promise: lamps, thresholds, a map drawn by hand. The early Salem run will stay honest about costume and record sharing the same street. The timber section will state used, not original, in a voice that trusts the ears that want it said out loud. The witch house will hold the rule of edges ethic and the phrase film the joints twice, once spoken and once shown. The museum will gift on loan and fold into the night where rules go first. The southbound drive will say nothing clever, only work words. The Borden floor plan will be a diagram drawn on paper in frame, not on screen as a graphic. Hand proves humility. The stones will sit without names. The harbour will carry scale. The return will close the drawer with soft hardware, not a slam. He writes, "No scare bait" in the margin and boxes it. Once boxed, it's binding. He tests colour on a few stills. Not a grade, just a tolerance check. Timber wants warmth until it looks like varnish. He stops one click before varnish. White rooms like cool until blue eat skin. He backs it off. Night shadows want deep until detail is gone. He lifts just enough to see the rope curve where a hand will want to rest. He writes, gentle grade, keep fibers. Fibers matter, cloth, rope, paper, rope again. Fibers are the roads in small shots. Before he turns in, he does 3 tiny edits in the head to see if the spine holds. Lamp hum under a bench ladder with a sentence about names off camera. Does the ear lean in instead of out? It does. Storm window whistle under a hallway line. Does the body feel a room without needing a sign? It does. Buoy bell under the clothes. Does it ask for an ocean of meaning it doesn't deserve? It almost does. He moves the bell earlier. The clothes can stand on hinge tone and a latch. He writes a single negative space question at the bottom of the page and leaves a line for section 13 to answer. If the episode is honest, can the viewer sleep anyway? He draws a box under the question that says bench, coil, horizon, and then lets the pencil roll to a stop off the pad. He turns the lamp to its lowest click. The room returns to itself, a simple file box with a shade and a chair. Outside, far traffic draws a thin pencil line under the window and pulls it away. He smiles at the idea of a pencil line that moves. Then he sleeps. He builds the timeline like a carpenter lays a floor, plank by plank with a hand on seams. The first track is not image but bed, the city hush from Boston's first night at its lowest honest level. He rides gain with the smallest movements, never letting the bed turn into syrup or disappear under the noise floor. Over the bed he lays a picture he trusts, lamp halo on brick, threshold brass rubbed thin. He starts the voice last. The voice arrives not to command but to keep company. Plain, measured, third person, fewer adjectives than the hand wants to write. He lets the first sentence end 1 second earlier than feels safe. Early endings by trust. The second block carries that public clock at 7:06. He keeps the number to himself and shows the hand on the 6 so the viewer's own math can become the anchor. Under it, a light train chime. He marks a micro breath, 2 counts, before the Salem arrival, so the body has time to close one place and open another, cut on a shoe, not a face. He takes the memorial by edges exactly as planned, wall, bench corner, shadow hand of a branch indecisive in the wind. He drapes 10 slow breaths of shadow and says nothing that a sign could say better. Signs belong to towns. He will quote none. The show block keeps rhythm, not plot. He chooses the presentation's door opening as a hinge and lets the transition live in sound. Inside, muffled, drum, door, outside, hinge. He pulls the drum down 2 dB because drums have a way of deciding they are the main character. In the street after, he inserts the lamp hum he found on the side block, barely there because a hum under an evening sentence makes the ear think nighttime without needing night. He checks the meters, keeps peaks gentle, refuses the temptation to lift quiet to TV standards. This channel walks at night. Daytime volume rules don't fit. Timber and joints. He lays the beam seam at 7 Gables next to a joint in a modern gallery. Old and new, shaking hands without a voice under it for 3 seconds. 3 seconds feels long until the eye learns to rest. He slides a breath of harbour rope, grown under the waver of old glass looking at daylight. He cuts from waver to stillness to let the body feel the movement stop. He says the phrase used not original once and lets the picture hold the rest. A new peg in old wood, a paint line that kisses hardware, shoulders adjusting to a room by instinct. Which house? He shapes the stairpace by feet, not legends. He counts the hush on the narrow rise and keeps consonants in the stairwell. A child's shoe catches on the higher riser. He lets the catch run as audio only, no arrow, no zoom. The rope line becomes a river in shallow defocus. He holds it a beat the brain wants to fill with a face and does not fill it. He says the rules in the same breath he uses to draw the lines, names off camera, grief left where it belongs, record named when it is the subject, not the garnish. He fights the urge to sound like a sign. He reads like a neighbor who learned how to behave. White room hum folds into lantern night. HVAC becomes wind. Wind becomes guide voice. Guide voice becomes dates like handholds. He selects the guide's rules first, stamp card, and puts it in picture for 1 second, enough to prove, not to sell. He lays the storm window whistle under a hallway later. Here he lets lantern light carry itself. He marks the 3-second lantern recovery as its own breath, a small fear that passes, paired with the metronome tick of a crosswalk cut low so it doesn't boss the frame. He holds the wishes off camera. He decides against subtitles for them. Other people's wishes are not material. Southbound beats. He resists the B-roll montage the hand wants to make. He shows instead 1 laundry pin, 1 bus baseline, 1 receipt curling. He keeps the living goes on line for the end of the block, not over a house, but over a rake, leaning while a shoe is tied. He leaves the Mill River without freighted strings. He lets iron smell be a wordless thing made by rope, and a boat wake you never see. Borden interior. He draws the floor plan by hand on paper in the frame, the pen a little scratchy so the ear can believe it. He says, through, not around, then proves it with the lens low and level, through rug edge, floor seam, rug edge. He shows the alignments that almost agree, door off by a finger, and says, almost stack, only once. He keeps the guest room mirror for 2 breaths and stays out of it himself. He ducks the daylight keyhole without testing it. He lays the consonant stairwell from Pem under the back stairs for 10 seconds and lets the connection sit without a signpost. Stones and water. He goes edges first again, hinge flake, bench ladder of light, shadow of a coin, chain spans counted out and back. He uses the crow leg like a metronome for the section's breathing, no bird romance, no omen. He tucks the grounds cart motor under a sentence that says machines mean care, then gets out of the way. Harbour comes in 2 pieces, coil circle from above, and buoy bell in 3 notes. He puts the bell not at the end but halfway, where a viewer might need a friend after a fact that refuses to be softer. Endings earn quiet, middles borrow it. He sprinkles the viewer rest corners where they work hardest, the bench ladder between 2 sentences that carry weight, the brick fern seam after a list of what he left, the cleat and honest knot just before the close. He suppresses the music bed he had tested earlier. A mix that makes sleep possible has breath in its noise. Music is not wrong. It is simply more than this episode needs. He keeps 1 line of tone, flag tap on mast, so the world never feels like a vacuum. He watches the VU meters and the faces of the levels in his head, the place a whisper can sit without fading, the place a bus can rumble without waking. He rolls the whole cut once with his eyes closed and listens to whether the story holds without image. It mostly does. That means the beds are honest. He rolls it again with the sound muted and watches the joints, old, new, inside out, edge, center. Cuts land where rope meets hook and where a latch sits. Nothing jars because nothing tries to win. He takes out 3 lines that felt good to write and worse to hear. One was a metaphor about a staircase arguing with time, gone. One was a clever timing note that made a house sound like a puzzle built for him, gone. One was a soft scold at rumor. He keeps the correction and removes the scold. The town doesn't need his tone. He checks his leave list once more. He left what he promised to leave. He didn't let the camera borrow anything it couldn't return. Color gets 1 pass. He lifts shadows until rope fibers show. He gives timber warmth that stops 1 click before varnish. He leaves night blue enough to be night. He checks a face by accident in a background and crops it away without drama. He lays captions for dates and places with the smallest type the platform will display on a television at 10 feet. He uses periods. Periods are kind to eyes at night. At the end, he tests the bell 1 last time under the closing latch. It asks for meaning. He moves it earlier again and lets the close be hinge tone, latch, a breath. He writes a single negative space answer to the question from last night. If the episode is honest, can the viewer sleep anyway? Yes, if the viewer can breathe with it. He draws a tiny square and writes bench under it. He exports with a file name that says only place date and the quiet word filed. He lets the machine work. He cleans the desk. He straightens the pen. He turns the lamp to its lowest click and listens to the room return to itself while the progress bar does the part a person can't. He stands in the finished room with the file cooling on the drive and the city doing its business under the window. The air is the same as it was on the first night. And that is the point. Ordinary air, ordinary lamp, ordinary chair, pulled back to an angle that doesn't scold. He does a last small walk with the notebook, not to collect, but to owe. What does he owe after asking places to hold more than they should? He owes names to paper, not to camera. He owes rules said plainly and lived without fuss. He owes edges held, not crossed. He owes leaving, which is a kind of care. He owes repairs saluted, not sneered at. He owes used in place of original when the truth asks. He owes space where a viewer can rest and still feel kept company. He owes a drawer that shuts, not a door that slams. He looks at the map he drew on the first night, circle to Salem, line to Fall River, line back, and sees how small the space is where a person can learn so much if they listen. He writes a line not for the episode, but for the person who will come behind him and forget the rule on a fast day. You're not here to win, you're here to keep the paper company. He draws a box around it and closes the notebook as if closing a lid on something that keeps working without light. He walks the hallway once so the building can sigh and so he can hear the sounds that keep sleep safe. A neighbor's cup set down, an elevator door refusing to bang, a hinge that learned dignity a long time ago. He doesn't film. He makes sure his body remembers what a safe hallway sounds like, so that later, when a script says hallway, a viewer can feel the word without bracing. He returns to the room and makes the tidy the way he found it, chair in, cord coiled, wastebasket empty, shade halfway, so the line it throws across the wall reads as a measure, not a warning. The outro exists, but it isn't theatre. He will say quietly in that third-person shape this channel keeps that the lamp stayed low and the dates were real, that the map is honest, that the work of care belongs to a lot of hands, many of whom never asked to be in anyone's story. He will say the pocket ritual if the night needs company. Slow breath in, loosen the jaw, thumb on the table, the quiet key. He will invite the night map without grabbing, city, local time, what device, so the file can find them next time. He will ask what detail stayed, the wavering glass, the rope curve, the way a latch carries a room's whole mood. He will tell them new, calm history. Horror arrives most nights, and if this kept them, they can subscribe after, not now, because nothing important needs to be interrupted to be true. He sets one last viewer corner and holds it for 30 seconds before credits. The cleat and honest knot still water moving, just enough to tell you time still works. Over it he speaks the smallest promise a file like this should make. That ordinary rooms are still allowed to be ordinary after we've told the truth about them. No spell, no demand. A promise that leaves a place with more dignity than it had to lend. He lets the buoy bell stay earlier in the cut. The close gets the hinge tone from the Borden door, work, not haunt, and the soft brush of a shade against its own fabric. He thanks the town sides of both places by not naming them again at the end. Names at endings turn into banners. He thanks the workers without saying worker by keeping their tools in view: rake, shovel, tray rail, rope, wrist flick on a valve. He thanks the guides by keeping their rhythm, not their faces. He thanks the viewer by leaving them one square of quiet between the last word and the first credit. 4 seconds that say you can stop here. You do not have to rush back to noise. He lays out the tiny publishing tasks as if they were housekeeping, description that promises only what the file keeps, tags that name places and years without cosplay, a thumbnail that shows an edge, rope, hinge, coil, rather than a face that can't consent. He writes a pinned note that asks for kindness in the comments and offers the same back. He sets the schedule to a night hour because that's when this kind of company does its best work. He checks captions because captions are not extra. They are the way some people hear. He reads the ethic ledger one last time and finds nothing to fix because he wrote it before he was tired, not after. He says the pocket rule out loud because saying it makes the throat remember, care before fear. He likes that the rule is not an argument. It just is. He puts the ledger away and files the file in the drawer in his head where trips like this live. Boston, Salem Fall River. Edges, joints, rope, floor plan, stones, water. He does not gild it with achievement. He gives it a tab that says, "We listened." He turns the lamp to its lowest click and lets the room decide how it wants to end. The shade line makes a neat stripe. The building breathes. Somewhere a hinge does its work without needing to be seen. That is the right final sound for a story that promised work, not haunt. He stands very still and listens until the hallway gives him back his own quiet. Then he leaves the room the way he found it. Clean, ordinary, ready for someone who needs it next. And he pulls the door until it meets the latch and stops. The stop is soft and the night does not object. He walks away with the keys in his pocket and the rule in his hand, small enough to fit, strong enough to hold. He keeps the lamp low and thanks everyone for staying with a true map, Boston, Salem, Fall River, told quietly. He invites the night map one more time. Viewers add their city and local time in the comments and what they're listening on, iPhone, Android, TV, car or earbuds, so the line of quiet listeners can circle the world. He asks what details stayed with them: the wavering glass at 7 Gables, the rope curve in the witch house, the 3-second lantern recovery, the misaligned doorway in Fall River, or the bell that rang in 3 notes at the harbour. He says new, calm history horror arrives most nights. If this kept someone company, he suggests subscribing after the video ends, then tapping the bell so the next file finds them at the right hour. He thanks those who share the video or leave a thoughtful note. He reminds that care travels farther than fear. He straightens the notebook, centers the bowl, and leaves the room how he found it. Lights low, story filed, latch kept.